Emil Guillermo. That's right. Emil, like breakfast or lunch. I guess it would depend on what time zone you're in. Could be dinner. Emil Guillermo. Guillermo? Doesn't that look like Guillermo, Jimmy Kimmel's sidekick? No, he's a first name Guillermo. And he pronounces it the Spanish way, the Mexican way. He says Guillermo, which it's like putting like a screwdriver in my ears. Screwdriver? He says Gear. I say Guillermo. Gill. Fish gill. Pacific people. Philippines. Guillermo. A yearning for freedom. Guillermo. That's me. Emil Amok. Amok? Are you a muck? A-M-O-K. It's one of the few Filipino words in the English language. It means to be thrust into a murderous frenzy. You can deal with that, metaphorically. But I'm controlled. On the internet, I am controlled. I am controlled. Since I've meditated, I am controlled. How are you? Welcome. This is our program. This is Emil Amok's Takeout. It's my takes on all things considerable. There are so many things worth talking about. We call this WDAAAT. What does an Asian American think? Because what does an Asian American think? I mean, do they ever stop to ask us? Do they ever stop to ask us about? I heard a poll today about masks for children, just masks in general. Asian American, we have masks. We love our masks. I thought, why do the Asians who were, used to wearing masks, why do they have all the? I love my mask. Anyway, that was the only poll today that I saw that made me say, "Oh, did they ever ask any?" They never say. There's never enough of a pool. There's never enough of a sample. Well, now here you get a full sample. Emil Amok's Takeout. Our takes on all things considerable. And as I said, there's a lot happening today, which is why, ordinarily, I have to, put on my glasses here to make sure that ordinarily we come on at 2P Pacific Live. 2P Pacific Live. And that's because, we're sort of at the end of the day for a lot of people on the East Coast, and we're at the beginning, well, not the beginning, sort of the middle here where I am in Western United States. And then we have people from all over who listen or check in. Of course, this only pertains if you're watching live. But if you are, say, not watching live, but watching the recording, and our recordings are all on amok.com. You could be watching at your leisure. Anyway, my columns are at ALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, aldef.org/blog. This is hard to believe, but it's true. Episode 247. 24/7? No. We're only on Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific Live, unless, you catch the recording. 247. Wow. And, you listen, see how long an episode usually is. But episode 247, on today's show, we're going to talk about Ukraine. You got to talk about Ukraine. I mean, it's a big deal. And we're getting little incremental things. I mean, they tend to repeat the things that they were saying a week ago. Got to talk about Ukraine now. Now it's like the outright lie. Russia says they're withdrawing troops. No, they're adding troops. America's now saying, hey, trust but verify. But now the U.S. is saying they're lying. This is the gaslight approach of Putin and Russia, which is the autocrat's way. And thank goodness, I think it's going to be kind of this incremental march to something, maybe to diplomacy. But this is the modern world's sense of diplomacy now, where we'll put the troops out. Russia puts the troops out, says they're withdrawing, they're not. America sends troops to support NATO. NATO is strengthened by what's happening with Putin and on the Ukrainian border. But you look at an overview map, and it's frightening. We're really close to war, and you're dealing with someone you can't trust. And if you're a person like myself, an average American citizen, do you trust the Western media? You don't trust state media. You don't trust Putin. If the Americans say he's lying and it's gaslighting, yeah, he's gaslighting the world while those troops are on the border. But then, do you trust America as a citizen, knowing how jingoistic the U.S. can be? Although, look, we've lost a number of wars recently. We're not that jingoistic. But we do support this military industrial complex that really takes care of the world. I mean, this is our business. So you see, it's not that easy, democracy, where, all right, we trust our representatives, they're doing the right thing. But if you're basically a pacifist like I am, the next step clearly is more talk, more talk. Unfortunately, this is the kind of thing that gets you to more talk. This is the Cold War at a human scale. Troops at the border. The Ukrainians know about this situation. They've known about it the last 8 years, they say. On the one hand, the United States is saying, well, Ukraine's just trying to keep their populace calm. But they have been undergoing this sort of buildup for the last 8 years. So we are in a situation where, as citizens of the world, observing this, being forced to cross our fingers and hope that the representatives of the governments involved don't screw up. Because we don't need a World War screw up. We need them to keep talking. Simple as that. So I mentioned Ukraine right off the bat because it is important. I'll get to the Olympic dope thing. I'll get to talking about Kamila and the Gu-ster and Alyssa, who is really, she was America's star at the figure skating. They're going to replay it tonight, but the Gu-ster, she's going for the gold in her thing. We'll talk about that. Talk about Thao. I've been wanting to talk about Thao for the last couple of days. I just haven't gotten to it because he's the Asian American in the George Floyd case, which is interesting because he finally testified this week. Talk about Michelle Tafoya and how she, look, as long as she talked football, I listened to her. She was a sideline reporter. But now she's talking a Republican Party she's leaving football, the sidelines, to go onto the political sidelines, running a Republican gubernatorial campaign. And now I don't like her at all, especially when you discover her views on race. We'll talk about that. But first, I want to talk about my dear friend, Jose Joganoza. I talked about him yesterday briefly because if you go to my ALDEF post, aaldef.org/blog, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, I wrote about Christina Yuna Lee. And she was the young woman who died tragically on Sunday morning. She was stabbed to death when a perp got into her apartment and and it's gruesome. It's a gruesome murder. She was stabbed, and it happened when I was finding it out about the death. It happened on the same day that my friend died in peace. Home hospice situation. He's 76. I'd known Joe for, wow. I said I knew him for more than 50 years. Yeah, closer to like 60 years I knew Joe. I didn't know Christina at all. And in my LDEF piece, I talked about Joe. And I talked about how I didn't know Christina, but I knew we were fighting the same fights. And then I talked about Joe, and I mentioned how he was in the military. I vaguely knew he was in Vietnam and he was in the Army. But I finally talked to his brother yesterday, and he let me know something that I didn't know. And that is Joe was one of the veterans who came back from Vietnam and experienced the kind of shame that I know many Vietnam vets felt. And it's because a lot of people were against the war. They didn't want the war to happen, but who served? Who served but kids who were considered poor, disposable, who it was the luck of the draft. I mean, he was drafted. Joe came with his family from Peru when he was just 16. Went to high school, didn't go to college, didn't even take advantage of the GI Bill, but he was drafted, went into the military. And that's where he really discovered how America treats people who are considered disposable. Immigrants like him, people of color, people without means, people who weren't able to go to Canada, people who weren't able to avoid the draft because of student deferments. He served. Ask anyone who served in Vietnam. Have them tell you their story. And it wasn't pleasant. So I talked about Joe yesterday. I just said he served in the Army, served in Vietnam, and he would have been there for Christina had he known her. And I didn't realize just how much he would have been there because Joe was on the front lines. He saw it all, good, bad. He saw Agent Orange. And upon his return, despite the shame, despite being a young kid at war, infantryman, a grunt, in combat, he served with honor in Vietnam. For that service, he received a Bronze Star for valor. Now, I know you say, hey, come on, Emil. Bronze Star. They were giving away for like meritorious service in Iraq and Iran. And yeah, I know. It's become kind of like the millennial soccer trophy for people in the service. But believe me, not in Vietnam, where it had the same amount of weight. The Bronze Star had the same amount of weight as it did in World War II. I mean, the Bronze Star is like the fourth highest level medal you can get. And it usually came because of courage in combat. And that's what my friend Joe had. He was a combat hero. He saved lives. I know there was a lot of shame serving in Vietnam. And veterans came back and felt dishonored, disrespected. But my friend Joe Ganoza came home with a Bronze Star for valor. And I know even then he felt a bit of the shame that other vets felt. He didn't talk about this. And I didn't really go into it yesterday because I didn't know. But his family found in a box somewhere, not in a prominent place, not up on the wall, not in a curios kind of display, hidden in a box, they found the Bronze Star. And that's when they realized that what they saw of Joe, the man in uniform, all the pictures, they knew he did something for his valor, or for valor, courage, in the name of his country. He served his country well. And that makes his passing at this time, well, a little more painful than we thought. I mean, you recall yesterday, because he went into hospice, people were kind of prepared. They were ready. They kind of understood. He had lost his wife just a couple of months ago and had been depressed. And so that, in combination with other medical things going on internally, made him a little less willing, let's say, to keep fighting for his last breath. So, and then I found out, his passing unveiled another kind of layer to his life that even his family didn't know, because he didn't talk about it much. We just knew he was there. He served. He came back. He had a successful life, middle-class life, worked for the city, but he was a Vietnam vet. And I should have known that usually means something. That usually means you paid a price. And he kept it within all this time. The family just discovered the medal, a Bronze Star. So I tip my hat once again to my dear friend who died this week, same time as I was contemplating and thinking about another tragic death, Christina Yuna Lee's death. This is part of life. How we process these things, but it's a memory. A memory that says, hey, if you know a Vietnam vet, talk to them. Find out what happened. Don't forget to give him a hug. So there was, his family called him G.I. Joe. His name was Jose, G.I. Joe, they called him. He was a hero. All right, we talked about my friend Joe Ganoza, talked about Ukraine. The thing about Ukraine, and I know that it's easy to kind of see what's happening there and say, well, they're going to talk. I'm going to live my life. Should be concerned for what it stands for. I mean, just in terms of how we're dealing right now with this idea of democracy in America and how democracy has if you think democracy hangs by a thread in the United States, well, globally, this is a big deal. When the autocrats in Russia decide for Ukraine what Ukraine should be, what Ukraine will be, who they will deal with, who they will talk to, who will lead Ukraine. The Ukrainians? I mean, this is about independence and freedom. And if you don't see or don't feels, if you don't feels, if you don't feel the 1776 thing here, if you're Asian, if you don't feel like how the Filipinos felt with people power, standing up to the dictator. I mean, Ukraine is relying on NATO, or NATO is saying, hey, look, Ukraine, we're here, we're an alliance, we'll be here. I mean, of course, Ukraine has taken billions of dollars. They just got $1 billion from the United States this week. So we have a situation here where what's at stake is the freedom of these people. And if Ukraine should fall, it does send a message throughout the world about what autocrats will do anywhere, even in Asia. And I'm talking about autocrats like the Chinese government and what they might do to Taiwan. I mean, we already know what they've done to the Uyghurs. They've kind of incorporated the Uyghurs into Xinjiang and in the West. I mean, that's the reason why the United States is boycotting diplomatically the games. But those are games. This is real freedom. This is the real game right here. Putin, when he met with President Xi in China at the start of the Olympics, people thought, oh, well, they're going to wait. They're going to wait till the end of the Olympics. And now it looks like every day. The U.S. even started, they stopped saying the war was imminent. Now they're back to saying, they're not using the word imminent, but they're saying it's urgent, the threat is real, invasion could happen at any time, because Putin is saying one thing and doing the other. Gaslighting the United States, gaslighting the world. And you just got to hope, cross your fingers, that nothing accidental happens and they keep talking. Because already the one thing they talk about the most is that Russia will have some kind of setup for the pretext of war. Meaning the excuse, the justification. They'll fabricate something so that they feel justified going in. Heck, I'm surprised that Putin isn't saying, hey, Valieva falling down, that's a pretext for going in. No, he wouldn't say that. He's not that. He's Zelensky of Ukraine. He's the comedian turned politician. Putin's just the bad guy who became the politician. But that's what you got to watch out for. You got to watch for any kind of pretext, knowing that you just can't trust the Russians. And the only reason why I'm trying to think, why would Putin want to rattle his saber now? I think he's doing it because he senses that among democratic countries, there is a weakness. And when you say democratic countries, who are you talking about? You're talking about the United States, first and foremost. Germany has a new prime minister. England, You know, the NATO alliance, essentially, right? They're strong, but he senses that with America being somewhat divided on all issues, this is the time that he makes hay, and he's doing it. So we don't want to see war, but I fear, is this going to be a prolonged? If it's a prolonged thing, it's Cold War 2.0, I guess, except on the ground, real guns, no missiles, long range, right there, close. And as I said, if you ask the Ukrainians, they'll say, we've had this the last 8 years. So pay attention. These are the real games. The real games where what's at stake is democracy. All right, so that brings us to not the fake games. They're real games, the Olympics. But it was sad today when, I'm going to get her name right, Kamila Valieva. I used to just call her the Russian skater, Kamila. But she fell, and it's funny because I was watching the local NBC where I am, and they don't want to spoil it. They want to tease and get big audience for tonight's prime time. But how can you? I saw that in the morning. How can you not say that Valieva fell and didn't medal and has really, she's brought a cloud over these games. Don't want to blame her. You want to blame the adults. Yes, she's a minor, but she showed just how fragile she was. She fell during her free skate. And I guess that's kind of an ironic metaphor. You are not free. You are not free in Russia. You are not free in China. And whoever thought it was a good idea to dope their skaters, well, here's one of the things I saw reported. People saying, well, Russia believes everyone is doing this, everyone is doping, and that it's just a matter of time, right? Someone gets caught. So, cost of doing business. This is what they do. This is what happens when you live in a country where the rule of law is debatable. The rule of law is not strong. And this is true with China. This is true with Russia. They just figure, well, we can just do whatever we want. Just let them prove that we did something wrong. And they can't, or they don't, or they won't. And they get away with stuff. But Valieva was found with drugs in her system. She had an excuse. In the meantime, all the athletes who are skating cleanly are just, well, I mean, it casts aspersions on all of them, really. So Kamila fell, was supposed to win. Her fall enabled two other Russian skaters to finish 1-2. A Japanese skater was third. And the Americans were just out of it. They did not. They were out of contention from the beginning of the day, except it was a good day for Alyssa Liu, the 16-year-old for Team USA. And there's a great piece in the Washington Post where they're watching the Russian star on TV, or she's in a room with reporters, and they all ooh when Valieva falls. And someone said she fell, and Lou just shrugged because she's competing. She's trying to get it out of her head. But this is a good report here by Les Carpenter. He writes, in this room, only a short walk from the ice where Valieva was skating, Lou wasn't thinking about Valieva or doping or the Russian skaters or any of the things that obsessed the adults around her. Only a year older than Valieva, the main thing she cared about was what she had come to the Olympics and skated well and saw many of her skating friends. And because of all this, she began to cry. I'm just like, and so many of my friends are here and they like trained so hard and went through a lot and they like finally did really good at the Olympics, she said before she began to sob. When she stopped crying, she said there were sobs of joy. I'm really happy for everybody and myself too, she said. The Olympics exceeded my expectations. I didn't think I was going to do this good here, and I made a lot of friends along the way, and I got to see them there or here. And so you have 16-year-old Alyssa Liu from the United States. Once she hears that Valieva has fallen and that she's off the podium, she doesn't feel anything so much about Valieva so much as she does about the whole Olympic experience. You know, and this was a real roller coaster ride for Lou because she had tested positive for coronavirus. And when I first heard that news about a month ago, I was sure that meant that she couldn't go to Beijing, even though she was the top female skater of the U.S. The top, Alyssa Liu. And she told the reporter here that she had already accepted the fact that she would never live her childhood dream of skating the Olympics when the text arrived from U.S. Skating that she had made the team. They told her she had made the team. And then after, she says everything after that felt like a gift. So she's trying to be above it all. But it's got to be something. She's 16. And this is the thing, when you get young kids in the Olympics and they are the best in the world, they're kids. Their emotions are raw. And I have to say, when I saw Valieva fall, it was like, and all the commentators said the same thing, like, oh, how must this kid feel right now? 15. And here we have Alyssa Liu. She kind of got yanked around. She got the COVID test about a month ago. Then she said she thought she wasn't going to go. Now she learned that she did make the team, and she sees every day as a gift. So, staying positive. Alyssa Liu didn't medal, but I'd give her a medal. I'd give her a medal. She said when she saw Valieva come into the room, she said nothing. This is the reporter saying. She moved quickly, said nothing. A Russian guard walked a few feet behind. Her eyes were red. Her Olympics were ruined. And it was just an interesting contrast to the joy that was felt by Alyssa Liu. These are the games, right? So the skating, you probably see it tonight. I don't think I spoiled anything for you by saying that she fell. I won't reveal who won the gold, but it wasn't the U.S. So we remember Alyssa Liu. All right, a couple more things on our plate. I want to talk about Eileen Gu because tonight she is going to win gold. If you haven't seen her do the half pipe, that's when I first saw Eileen Gu. Rather, I didn't know Eileen Gu before. I mean, I know she's been sort of on the map as a San Franciscan, the ABCT, American Born Chinese Team, I like to call her. And I don't mean to, go to my ALDEF blog at aaldef.org/blog and see how I really feel about Eileen Gu. I think she blurs everything. I think she spoils everything for Asian Americans. I don't think she understands what it means for an American-born Chinese teen person to be biracial and binational and not really care to clarify for everyone. Because as long as she blurs this, it becomes something that could affect or could have consequences to all Asian Americans. Now, I'm not kidding you. When already Asian Americans in university settings and labs, and if they're a scientist, how some people look at them and wonder, are you an American? I mean, Asian Americans like myself, we fought so hard to be seen as an American, not as a ambiguous person of dark skin, person not white, a non-white. We fought hard to say, hey, look, we're not foreigners. We're Americans. We say it all the time. But I know that there are people who look at me and they'll say, are you even American? Well, yeah. Well, funny, look, what does an American look like? Oh, well, taller? You see, this is an issue for all Asian Americans and people of color. People just look at you and they don't automatically think American. And they should. And that's the line that Eileen Gu, her Chinese name, that's what she blurs. And she was so good last night on the half pipe. She just smashed the competition. And then later she said, well, I haven't even brought out my best yet. And she scored a 93 and then a 95 and then so much higher than all the other, just took one score, the best score. She is so far ahead. Now, barring anything unforeseen, and in these Olympics, unforeseen means don't fall, don't trip. Because, keep your balance, you win a gold. Oh, keep your balance and go fast. So, Eileen Gu, her failure to say that she is definitely an American or definitely Chinese. She says American born, Chinese team, but she doesn't say, oh, I've given up my citizenship. That's going to continue to haunt her. Yet yesterday, she did talk to reporters. Here's what she said. She said that here's what she said. People sometimes don't know what to do with other people when they're not fitting in a box. They say, is she Chinese? Is she American? Is she a model? Is she a student? Why is she trying to change the world when she's only 18? And I'm not trying to solve political problems right now, she said. And I'm aware that I'm not able to do everything I want to do in this exact moment. My biggest goal is for some girl to be sitting at home watching free skiing for the first time and thinking, maybe that could be me someday. Maybe she sees someone who looks like her doing it and thinks, hey, I can do that too. Well, okay, great. You can inspire Chinese girls. And you've inspired an old guy like me. I'm thinking, hey, I could do that too. No, I can't do that. No, maybe I could. I mean, I was not bad for a brief period of time on skis. But no. But she has inspired. Okay, I can do it. Yeah, the worst enemy or the worst the worst, what is the word she used? Your biggest, something like the biggest obstacle is yourself. She's great in that kind of motivational thing. All right, great. Is sport above the geopolitics of the day? No, it's not. And that's why I just wish you'd just come clean. I wish you'd say, hi, I'm Aileen. This is what I'd say. Hi, I'm Eileen Gu, and I have renounced my American citizenship. I know all you DACA folks and undocumented who love your American or want American citizenship so badly. Hey, look, I gave mine up. Sorry. And why? Well, because I made $31 million last year. And, I could have made that and still pay taxes, American taxes. Forget it. See, that's kind of what this is about. Who gets a tax? Eileen Gu. Now, maybe she cut a deal with the Chinese. But I think a little honesty is helpful. Because believe me, she's blurring the line, and it's going to cause some Asian Americans some grief. Because people will look at him and say, are you Asian? Or are you American? Because that barrier still exists today. So I want to talk briefly about Thao. He's the ex Minneapolis officer. He took the stand this week in the civil rights trial over the killing of George Floyd. And this is from the Star Tribune. Breaking his public silence for the first time since George Floyd's killing, ex-Minneapolis police officer Thao testified on Tuesday that he was focused on crowd control and believed his three colleagues were looking after Floyd during the arrest. That's what he said. He believed, my other guys, I'm just focused on this. This is like, got the blinders on. Under questioning from his attorney, Robert Paul, Thao testified that he didn't realize Floyd was in medical distress until Minneapolis firefighters arrived on the scene after an ambulance had taken Floyd away. Was it at that point that something sunk in? Paul asked. Yes, Thao said, adding that until then he had no idea something serious had happened. Okay, that's called not having a clue. The clueless Thao, which is convenient, but clueless. Of course, Floyd died May 25th, 2020, after former Minneapolis police officer, they're all former pretty much, Derek Chauvin knelt on his neck for more than 9 minutes, while J. Alexander Kung and Thomas Lane helped pin Floyd's stomach down in the street. Floyd's hands were handcuffed behind his back. Thao kept a crowd increasingly angry bystanders at bay as they yelled at the officers to relent and to check Floyd's pulse. So Thao said, hey, full-time crowd control. Thao is 36. He made a joke about his toddler that caused the judge to chuckle. So he seemed kind of calm. Under cross-examination, he was not angry or defensive, although he was occasionally evasive. This is according to the reporter. He testified that he expected his three colleagues to address any medical needs that arose during the arrest because he had positioned himself in the street as a, quote, human traffic cone to alert drivers, people on the roadway. He was questioned for 2 hours and 45 minutes. Said, the attorney asked, at any point did you touch Mr. Floyd? I did not, Thao said. So in cross-examination, defense attorneys, they battled about how much video could be played, trying to point out that Thao was, the prosecutor wanted to point out that Thao had a view of Floyd's neck for the first 6 minutes. And she asked Thao what he observed the officers doing in the third minute of restraint. He responded restraining. She asked how. He said same thing. She said same position. He said generally yes. So interesting dynamic there at the trial. Thao says he's a human traffic cone, didn't know anything was wrong. He was into crowd control and so focused. But the interesting part about Thao is his backstory. He told jurors that he decided to become a police officer after he flunked out of community college in his first semester. And he worked at Cub Foods, which I guess is a counter, Cub Foods. He choked up as he recounted how he first encountered Minneapolis police when he was 7 or 8, and his father beat him and his younger brother with an extension cord to break up a fight. So, trying to build a little sympathy. When their mother intervened, Thao said their father beat her, then retrieved a gun and threatened to kill them. The family fled to an aunt's house where they called 911. The prosecutor objected. It was overruled. And so Thao said he was born in St. Paul, spent much of his childhood in North Minneapolis, said they were so poor they ate one meal a day and had 2 meals a day if school was in session. So he was beaten. He was poor. I think we're hearing the two Thao sob story, which shouldn't be a surprise. But this was, the Hmong community, it's not Suni Lee is an exception, right? But there's a lot of poverty. As I say that, there's a lot of success stories, people rising up, getting into college, doing good, doing well in their careers. But Tu Thao, at the George Floyd trial, presenting a sob story. So I'm glad I got that out. Tu Thao, he's an important guy. People remember George Floyd, the case, and they remember what happened. And they remember seeing the Asian officer and wondered, why didn't you do something? Well, he didn't do something because he says, the other officers there would do something. They didn't. Maybe he should have acted. So one more thing on Michelle Tafoya. Michelle Tafoya is going on Tucker Carlson and talking about how great, or he's talking about how great it is that she's joining the Republican gubernatorial campaign in Minnesota. But for much of the time, Tafoya was trying to be critical of things like critical race theory and things like any kind of racial sensibility or racial. Well, she just comes down hard on that. We are race neutral. We're race neutral. Race doesn't matter. It's character. It's all about. It's all about not skin color, but it's all about the kind of person you are. So here's an exchange between Tafoya and Whoopi Goldberg on the View. Tafoya said, "Why are we even teaching that the color of the skin matters? Because to me, what matters is your character and your values." And Whoopi said, "Yes, but you live in the United States. You know that the color of your skin has been mattering to people for." Tafoya says, "Can't we change it that it doesn't?" And Goldberg says, "We need white people to step up and do that." And Tafoya says, "But they've been doing that since the Civil War." See, I think you hear that exchange and you see that Tafoya is kind of clueless. She's been given opportunity because she's a woman of color, and yet she doesn't recognize. She says, "Well, this is just me. I don't mention it." That's what she says. I think at some point in my life, I once had that view too. Hey, look, I'm just me. But when you feel discrimination, you understand, oh, wait a minute. I'm not just me. I'm me, but on the exterior, people see a person of color, and that's where skin color matters. Because history will show that the racists made sure that skin color matters. The ironic thing is when someone successful like Michelle Tafoya says, "Look how successful I am. See, skin doesn't matter." Well, you're just being used, honey. No, scratch the honey part. You're being used to, you're being given the benefit, but you don't see it as a benefit. You just see, oh, they're just doing it because of I'm me. Well, you can think that, but clearly you haven't been discriminated against. You are a lucky person. So this is where we are now with the race debate. We're back to, let's move to colorblind. Let's move to race neutrality. Let's move to not making race matter. And of course, it coincides when the population gets browner and darker, and people who are white are now in the minority. And they don't really know how to deal with that. So let's just make it all neutral and let's throw it out. Let's forget about the past. Let's just move forward. Not so fast. Not so fast. Anyway, so Michelle Tafoya saying race, this is how she felt. I don't know if I like her. I know I like her less. I was just sort of like, okay, not a bad sideline reporter, but now she's a politician. Now she's using her fame. Anyway, usually what happens, people have they want to negate race. They want to make sure that race doesn't play a part. And then they get initiated and become discriminated against. And then it doesn't matter like how much money or how much fame, people can't get beyond The fact that they're white and you're not. That's why it matters. Tucker Carlson would play the screaming screen flip at that point. Hey, that's it for our show today. Hey, thank you for watching. This is Emil Guillermo 247. Read my columns on amok.com, also on the ALDEF blog, Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. That's at ALDEF, AALDEF.org/blog. Talked about my friend, passed away, G.I. Joe. Talked about Ukraine. Kamila. Okay, I'm going to say her name. I'm not going to say the Russian person. Kamila Valieva. Talked about the Gu-ster. She is the golden goose for someone. Alyssa Liu, didn't medal, but she was the highest ranking American figure skater in the free skate. You'll see it tonight. Alyssa didn't win, but she was still joyful. Kamila didn't win, and she was less joyful. But that's tonight. The Gu-ster does go for the gold. So if you watch, just remember what I'm saying. It matters that she declares or does not declare. It matters that she declares her citizenship, because that will tell us a lot about her. Her choice will tell us a lot about her. Talked about Thao. His choices tell us a lot about him. And Michelle Tafoya. Oh, it was a lot of interesting stuff today, Emil. Oh, yeah. You should tune in again. We're here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, live. Live if you want to play with us on Facebook. Facebook, EmilGuillermo.media on Facebook, Emil Guillermo on YouTube, at Emil Amok on Twitter. At Emil Amok, yeah. And you can always Twitter us. Yeah, Twitter us. Where's that other thing? It shows my, I say replays on amok.com. Yeah, if you want to replays on amok.com. You can also, email me. Go to amok.com. My regular viewers, regular listeners of the show know that on Thursdays, I usually end up doing something on the David Feldman Show, his podcast. I'm going to mention something to David. This is probably one of the last times I'm going to be able to talk about Uyghurs for some time. So maybe I'll talk about that. Anyway, regular viewers know, this is the time where I say, hey, it's okay. Don't feel bad. I mean, everything is related to some kind of shame, it seems sometimes. People feel a sense of shame. I don't know why, but they do. And when they do, well, this is when you do this is like a wrestling hold. Self-sleeper hold. No, it's a self-hug. It's like, you're okay. You belong. That's what you got to do. It works. It helps. Go slow. You belong. And as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Till tomorrow. Emil Guillermo.